You're listening to Panthers on Tap. I'm Curtis Rauen, joined by Bryson Karbley. We're just two fans sharing our love for the game in Carolina Panthers football. So join us, crack open a cold one, some bubbly, a little wine, some scotch. We don't care, whatever makes you sleep better at night. Before we dive into the episode, a little self-promotion. Stop what you're doing. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap. Join the discussion on our Facebook group. We have over 2,500 members. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Just search Panthers on Tap. We are officially 3 weeks away from the NFL draft. I'm excited to introduce you to our next guest this evening. But first, Bryson, just got to ask you quickly, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Unfortunately, both of our teams are out of the NCAA tournament. Well, both of your teams and then my team are out of the NCAA tournament. But I'm quietly cheering for NC State. Live in Raleigh, so I'm excited for the city.
Yeah, you got to kind of pull for the Wolfpack State team. They're on one hell of a run right now, 9 games straight, both men's and women's in the Final Four. Craziness. So,
Crazy.
Yeah, it's the Cinderella story for sure that's out on play there. But we got a big guest for you guys tonight. And joining us now is ESPN NFL draft analyst Jordan Reid. That's at Jordan_Reid on Twitter. So in your latest piece this week, Jordan, you and Matt went through some of the draft team needs and prospect fits. For the Panthers, you went with Zach Frazier, the center out of West Virginia. Can you tell us a little bit more about Frazier and what do you like about him, and where is he kind of at with that injury he had this past season?
Yeah, so he's one guy that I love to talk about just because he aligns perfectly with that dog mentality that Dan Morgan has talked about throughout the offseason. And with Austin Corbett, him coming over from guard to center and only being on the last year of his deal, I definitely think they need to groom somebody long term. And with Bryce, I think the plan is clear with him. And what I mean by that is them signing Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis. Me as a former quarterback, especially a shorter guy, I know that interior pressure always has a negative effect from the sideline of quarterbacks. So what Dan's plan is, I'm going to continue to address the interior offensive line just because we all know on this call the offensive line play was not very good in Carolina last year. But with Zach Frazier, he's a former wrestler, which is something that every NFL team values. He has that brute strength that you love. And then also he's a leader too, as well. So I think he embodies a lot of the qualities that Carolina is going to value, whether it's at 33 or 39. I think it would be a great pick at either one. But he just continues the trend of addressing and solidifying that interior offensive line.
Yeah, that center position is definitely an area of concern for me. Again, with Austin Corbett transitioning to that spot, not having a whole lot of experience there, definitely concerning coming off a major injury. But I think one of the bigger question marks, or at least for fans, is wide receiver. And I wanted to get your opinion, Jordan, on what wide receiver is most underrated right now that's not getting talked about a lot, and that could be available at 33. And could Carolina go that way?
Well, I think Carolina needs that big boundary X wide receiver. Is something that they don't have on the roster right now. I think they have 2 really good route runners in Adam Thielen. And also, I love the trade of Deontay Johnson as well. He's a little bit of a changeup than what they have right now, but they don't have that big body physical guy on the roster. So there's 2 guys that really come to mind that I think they'll likely target, whether it's at 33 or 39, whoever's left on the board. The first one is Xavier Legette of South Carolina, who's right down the road at South Carolina and Columbia. I was at the pro day for Legette. I thought he looked phenomenal there. Panthers receiver coach was actually running most of the drills there, and they had a strong contingent there as well. So I'm sure they're going to have a lot of interest in Legette. But once again, he has a lot of the traits that I think they're going to seek at the position. And then the other is Keon Coleman of Florida State. He's another one that's a little bit iffy as far as if he's going to be there. I think he's going to go on that fringe late first, early second round. But he's another one that's that big boundary X wide receiver that has that big body that Bryce is going to be able to throw up what I like to call some of those faith throws, just having the faith to go up and get it, that he trusts his receiver to go up and get it. Keon Coleman is that type of receiver. So I think both of those guys definitely could be in play at 33 or 39.
Now, you talk about Legette. Do you think, there's a real shot he's going to be there in the second round?
Yeah, I think so. But you never know. It only takes one team to select these guys, and he could go to Buffalo at 28. He'd go to Baltimore at 30. He'd go to Kansas City at 32. You just never know where these teams have these guys on their draft board. So if I had to guess as of today, I think he will be there at 33. I don't know at 39, just because I think there's going to be a run on wide receivers at the back end of the first and especially in the early second round.
Now, while we're on wide receivers real quick here, do you see a scenario where either Adonai Mitchell or Xavier Worthy, any of those Texas receivers, falls to the second round, or are those likely going to go in the first?
I would be surprised, especially after Xavier Worthy running as fast as he did. We all know that teams value that type of speed, especially when it is unique speed like that. And he's not just a speed merchant, he's a really good route runner as well. So I would be surprised if either one of those guys fell that late, especially Adonai Mitchell, with the way that he progressed last season and then how well he tested at the combine, too.
Okay, transitioning into a different position group here. Edges, that's another area of concern for Carolina, losing Brian Burns. They did bring in Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wonnum this offseason, but it's still an area of concern for sure. What edges do you like in that early second round range? Any prospects you're excited about?
There's three that really come to mind, and they're all different types. Or I should say one of them is different types. Darius Robinson of Mizzou is one that I definitely think could be in contention. Now, he's another one that you get mixed opinions about just because there's some people that like him more so on the interior as opposed to the edge, just because he's not your prototypical bendy type of guy that's going to win with speed around the edge. He's more so of your power rusher that's going to run through and has really good hand maturity off of the edge. So he's one I definitely think they could be in contention for. But the other two that I have in the same tier on this draft class is Adisa Isaac of Penn State and then also Chris Braswell of Alabama. Those are two other guys that definitely could be in tension. But if all goes well, and this is like a best case scenario for the Panthers, I don't think he's going to be there. But Chop Robinson of Penn State, if you cross your fingers and you hope that he's there and he slips to 33, I definitely think that would be best case scenario for them.
Got Bryce, you got another one? Or are you good? I had a quick question going kind of back to the wide receivers on this, and that's Ladd McConkey, because you saw a lot of buzz around the Senior Bowl and then his route running prowess and stuff like that. So do you think that buzz has kind of fizzled out, or do you see him still potentially in that fringe bottom half of the first round, or do you think he's more of a second round type player?
I think he's a second round guy, and I think he's going to be there at either pick, honestly. But the Deontay Johnson trade kind of put a little bit of water on that flame, that Ladd McConkey flame that Panthers had with him, just because they're very similar types, really good route runners, very fluid, really good hands as well. So I just think they already have that type of receiver on the roster. And you always want to get different types of wide receivers. You never want to stack those same types of guys, especially when you're talking about Bryce Young as well. You want those different types of receivers. That's why I said they probably would more so be in favor of somebody like Coleman or Leggett, just because they don't have that big boundary physical type of wide receiver on the roster right now.
Gotcha. And then what about possibilities of trading down? I know Dan Morgan, it sounds like he's not like the Scott Fitter. He's not going to make a ton of trades, and you probably won't see them move up. They have a lot of holes to fill. But do you think if they were to trade at all, trading down in the draft, would pick 33 be more likely, or 39, you think, if they were to take that route?
I think it would be more so 39 than 33, just because 33 is such a valuable pick. Just because there's going to be, it happens every year. There's going to be some guys that slip into the second round, and you have that first pick of the second round. So you're going to have your first pick of the litter of, let's say, a Chop Robinson or Keon Coleman or Xavier Leggett, somebody that may have slipped out of the first round. You're going to have the opportunity to take advantage of that. So I think it would more so be trading back from 39 as opposed to 33.
All right, Jordan. So just overall in the draft, in any position group, who's a player that's going to get drafted higher than people think right now?
That's a good question. Drafted higher, any round or just the first round?
Any round.
So one name that I definitely think is going to go much higher than what a lot of people are expecting is Ben Sinnott. He's a tight end out of Kansas State who had the best measurables of anybody at the tight end position. And Brock Bowers is clear in a way the best tight end in this draft class. But you've heard other names like Theo Johnson, Jatavian Sanders. The list goes on and on. Kate Stover of Ohio State is another name. But Ben Sinnott is one that definitely could be the second tight end drafted off of the board. That would not surprise me at all.
Wow.
I feel like Carolina has a need there as well, but I don't know if they'll address that early on. But I do think there's. What about corner? Any corners out there in maybe the third or fourth round? Because I feel like Carolina still needs some depth there as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that I like as far as from an outside perspective. Outside corner, we know J.C. Horn is definitely the top end guy, but he has had some durability concerns. So I definitely think they need to address corner, maybe not early on, but like you said, maybe in the third or the fourth round. But two guys that I really like in that area. The first one is Cam Hart of Notre Dame. I'm a big fan of Cam Hart. He's checked so many boxes throughout the pre-draft process for me. I don't know if he's going to be there in the third round. Prior to the combine, I thought he was going to be there, but his stock really is trending upward. Another is Kyrie Jackson of Oregon. He was an Alabama transfer a couple of years ago, transferred over to Oregon, had a really good combine and a really good Senior Bowl as well. And then a little bit of a later round name. He's probably going to go maybe more so in the fourth or the fifth round is Renardo Green of Florida State. He's one that definitely is intriguing to me as well from an outside corner perspective.
Bryce, you got anything else for him? I got one more. I'm going to put your feet to the fire here. We'll end on this.
Oh man, here we go.
if you from what you know today, who do you think the Carolina Panthers take at 33?
I think it's going to be a wide receiver, just because one of those guys are going to fall. They're going to slip to the back end of the first round or even the early second round, and they're going to have their pick of the litter, whether it's a Keon Coleman or Xavier Legette. I think it comes down to one of those two guys, depending on who was there for them, and I don't think they can go wrong with either one. But 39 gets really interesting. I think that's where they could look to address center, whether it's a Zach Frazier, Jackson Powers Johnson may miraculously be there. You never know. Some things, crazy things happen on draft day. So I think center more so could be in line at 39 as opposed to 33.
Well, Jordan, I just want to thank you again for taking the time. I know it's a busy time, 3 weeks away from the draft. Go give him a follow on Twitter. That's at Jordan_Reid. Appreciate you as always. Check him out on ESPN, of course. And we just want to thank you again for taking some time with us.
No problem. Thank you guys as always.
I remember to this time last year, me and you were planning a trip to Kansas City. So things are going to come up quick. Obviously, Carolina doesn't have a first-round pick. But I thought it was interesting, Bryson. It sounds like Big X receiver is the target for Carolina in this upcoming draft. Legette, obviously Keon Coleman if he's there. What was your takeaways from that? Anything from what Reid said?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. You know, in his latest mock draft, he has Carolina going 33 with a center, Zach Frazier, and you know his reasoning behind that really makes sense in my opinion. With all the uncertainty surrounding Austin Corbett, like I said about with him, you know that does make a lot of sense. And Zach Frazier is such a good prospect, and you know if another guy falls like Tyson Powers into the second round, and you have your choice between him and you know the best receiver on the board or Zach Frazier and the best receiver on the board, then that's going to be a hard choice for Carolina to make. And, you know, you're picking again a couple picks later. Do you take a chance and take that center before the wide receivers are gone, or do you take the wide receiver that you want? So
what would you do? I'm taking receiver. I think that's the bigger need.
Yeah,
early on.
I think it depends who's there at 33. And, you know, if it's Zach Frazier versus Legette, I'm probably going Zach Frazier. If it's Zach Frazier versus Xavier Worthy, I'm going Xavier Worthy. So I think it just really depends on who's available. But he made a really good point. You know, you have the first pick in the second round. It's a highly coveted pick because you know the first round ends and you come back the next day. You have time to review the board of who's left. You always have players that slip. I mean, that pick is going to be a hot pick, and Carolina could potentially get quite a bit if they do trade back from that spot. And you know they do have quite a bit of holes to fill, and depending on what kind of offers they get, we might be seeing Carolina has traded out of the 33rd pick come across our board or across our TV, you know, early on day 2.
Yeah, and you know, over the course of these next couple weeks, kind of shifting gears here, we're going to be focusing on tonight to start is the wide receiver group. We're going to kind of move these next two weeks into some of the other needs Carolina has, and then kind of just a round robin. And then once we get to the draft week, we'll obviously do our mock draft that we do every year with a bunch of people, and it'll be fun. So we're focusing tonight on wide receivers. That's why we did ask a lot of questions to Reid about that position group. And that obviously is still a big need because Bryce Young was throwing to really no one last year besides Adam Thielen, and Mingold trickled in and a little bit of Shark. But let's get into it. So Bryson and I both have ranked, I would say, our top 5 wide receivers that we think are going to be available, or that we hope to be available at that pick 33 or 39, whatever case it is. So let's go through that list, top 5. Do you want to start? Do you want me to start? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I'll go first. So again, this is me being hopeful, of course. I didn't want to be completely negative. All wide receivers are going to get taken in the first round. There's going to be a run. 20 wide receivers are going around 1. Didn't want to be that way for the purpose of this ranking. So my number 1 wide receiver, if he's available, which I think there's a possibility, is Xavier Worthy. I'm a huge Xavier Worthy fan, not just because of the speed. You heard Jordan talk about it a little bit. He's not a speed merchant, like Jordan said. He's an elite route runner. Obviously, he has the 4.21 speed. He's a wide receiver. He's coming off of in 2021, he had 981 yards, an average of 15.8 yards per reception, 12 touchdowns. In 22, 757 yards, 8 touchdowns. He's consistently put up good numbers in a good conference, Big 12. In 2022, second team all-team Big 12 selection, by the head coaches and the Associated Press. A wide receiver who really just does a lot of things. One of his biggest knocks is that he's skinny, but he's long. He's just got a lower weight than other wide receivers, and a couple of other things that I've seen about him. That he doesn't have the size to consistently win outside, but can be productive working in the middle of the field.
There you go. I threw up some stats too for you. Little bracket here.
Yeah. So from 2023, yeah, obviously, passer rating when targeted. That's one of the main things you can look at right there. 100.1. And I think Texas's quarterback went down with an injury, if I'm not mistaken, this past year. And, he's playing with a couple different quarterbacks. I think this is exactly what Bryce Young needs. This can be his Jamison Williams, or this can be his John Mechie. It's a wide receiver that I think does what Carolina needs. And Deontay Johnson, yeah, he can be a deep threat. Deontay Johnson's really good at running every route in the field. But Xavier Worthy is the deep threat. He is the threat that opposing defenses are going to have to really game plan for, because that speed is nothing to play with. There's not many corners on a field that can go step for step with Xavier Worthy. So if he's available at 1, I'm taking him. I'm running the card up, and I'm not thinking twice about it.
So that's your 1. Do you want to bounce back and forth between ones?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so it's sounding more and more like this guy is in here, but I just want to get it on the record that this is my number 1 guy across the board. No questions asked. If he is there, I'm running this card up. And I've been vocal about it on Twitter, and that's Adonai Mitchell. He's the guy who played with Xavier Worthy. I think he's a stud. I think he's a true number 1. I'll just get rid of that so we can put him up here.
And I did have a note real quick that I want to say. If A.D. Mitchell is there at 1, which I think it's highly unlikely, he was my number 1 as well.
Yeah, I think it's pretty unlikely at this point, but just putting it out there, this is my guy. This is my draft darling, whatever you want to call it. Watched several games of his. My notes, this is from him, what I've watched. This isn't just highlights. This is every plays that he's done in a game, watching it online. I think he can stretch the field. He's got strong hands. He's got a massive catch radius. I think he's a great adjuster to the ball when the ball is in the air. I'd like to see him play a little bit more against press man, because a lot in college you see a lot of zone and not, bump and run, up tight to the line with the corner. He makes highlight reel catches. Like, you want to see a highlight reel, this is your guy. I mean, he makes some spectacular plays, and he makes it on the biggest stage. I think he's got 5 or 6 touchdowns across, I think, 2 national championships. So the guy makes plays in crucial games, and that's what you want. That's what you want out of your number one. And I feel like he has it written all over him. His only knock I can see is giving up on plays, and I've seen it a couple times, and I've seen it widely reported across the league as well. But that is just one thing you got to watch. He, kind of dogs it if the ball isn't thrown his way, type of thing. But that is the only thing I can see out of his game. Otherwise, I think when he has the ball in his hands or he is thrown to, I mean, he's just a playmaker. He really is. The 2022 national championship game, he caught the game-winning 40-yard touchdown pass. And then the Peach Bowl this past year, he caught the previous year, he caught the game-winning touchdown in advanced national championship. So he makes a ton of plays. The guy is special. He transferred. I thought this was interesting. He transferred from Georgia to Texas, and he wanted to move closer to his 2-year-old daughter, who was living at the time in Missouri City, Texas. So he kind of made the move, got closer to family, and balled out in both colleges with 2 different quarterbacks. And I wholeheartedly think this guy is going to be a stud in the NFL, no matter who he goes to. He's kind of my Jordan Addison of last year. This guy is going to be good in this league. And if there is some prayers can be answered out there, is this guy falls to Carolina, because he would be a beast with Diontae Johnson and Adam Thielen. But let's go to number 2 here. Who is your number 2?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I agree with you on A.D. Mitchell. Every point that you made, I think he is. If he's there, I think he's the clear number 1 choice for Carolina. For me, number 2, it might be a little, after talking with Jordan, it might be a little controversial, but I'm still high on the Ladd McConkey train. He kind of has the similar traits of Diontae Johnson and then Adam Thielen across the middle. But he's 6 foot, 186, ran a 4.39 40. Very fluid athlete. He reminds me of almost like a Christian McCaffrey at wide receiver, not just because he's white, but his movement throughout drills at the combine and his pro day. He's so fluid, an excellent short area quickness, and he's capable of creating separation. And that's short, mediate, intermediate, and deep. He can be that deep threat with a 4.39 speed. He can do that. Obviously, route running is his specialty. An elite route runner, which a lot of people say that's probably why, in his height, that's probably why he's not as high on Carolina's board now with the Diontae Johnson trade. But another thing that he brings that shows up time and time again on film is his blocking ability. He is a very good run blocker on the outside, and I know throughout different coaches throughout Carolina's era in Carolina that they value that, and that's every team in the NFL really. If you're a wide receiver that can block, you're an extra lineman out there opening up holes in the run game. And Ladd McConkey is an excellent blocker. Again, he can track a deep ball. You see that time and time again on film. Didn't have a great quarterback this year in Georgia, but still made plays when it mattered. Ladd McConkey, I think if he's there, which I think it's a possibility, a very strong possibility that he's there in the second round, because I tend to agree with you, Curtis, that his stock is kind of, at no fault of his own, falling a little bit.
Feels like it, at least.
Yeah, it really does. And maybe that's just teams are being quiet because they really like him. But, I think there's a possibility that he's there. And, I really don't see any areas of weakness in his game besides his height. He's 6 foot. And if Carolina wants that big X receiver like Jordan was talking about, then obviously Ladd's not going to be that. But I think if you add him to this room, I think Ladd is pushing for wide receiver 1 with Diontae Johnson. I think they would go hand in hand, right beside of each other, because I really like Ladd's game a lot. And so at number 2, he is my wide receiver. If he's on the board at 33, then he's my second prospect.
I think it's pretty clear. Just look at the passer rating when targeted. The guy gets open and makes plays. 140.3 is ridiculous. I mean, you can only get to 150. So, and just for clarification, so folks know, the star by his yards, I was just putting it out there. He missed 4 games this year. He had a back injury. That's to signify that. Obviously, you see his stats weren't as great this year, but the guy is a machine. My notes, I watched probably 6-7 games of his, going through some of his games, and the first line in my thing is McConkey makes people stupid. He just does. Like, he is a machine at route running and getting separation. That's what this guy does. That is, you want a key trait for this guy, and it's separator. And that's what something Carolina lacked all of last season. So I can see why people want to see some guy want Matt McConkey. I get it, and I do too. I had him 3 on my list. I'll tell you 2 in a little bit, but he's right up there. I think he's a hell of a player. I think he plays bigger than his size. And he's made – I see the contested catches here, and you just gotta disregard some of that. He can make contested catches. I've seen several of them. The guy can make freaking plays, and I think he is going to be a really good wide receiver in this league. And I know sometimes those guys get slighted because they're a white wide receiver. That's just the reality of it. That's the way they get put in this box. But this guy can really make some plays. So I do think he has, it feels like, and that's why I asked Jordan about it. It just feels like his buzz has not been as high up as it has, when we were talking during the Senior Bowl and even the Combine. I felt like he was pretty high up the board. It just seems like that talk hasn't been around lately. But he was my number 3. 2, it's Xavier Worthy. You talked about him. I think that guy, and I didn't put a comp for every guy, because I don't just put a comp to put a comp. I put a comp when I'm watching a guy, watching his plays, and I can vision someone in my head. I don't just put a comp to put a comp. So I don't have comps for everyone. But for Worthy, I put Deshaun Jackson. That's who he reminds me of. Similar build, smaller. He can return. He did return in college, and this guy can make plays. We've seen it. Fastest guy in the NFL combine. He is a burner, and I don't think that's just it. He's got a really long stride. He's smooth with his feet, and he's great with the ball in his hands. He make guys miss. I think he's going to be special too. I get it. People knock him for his size, and they look at Ross, the other burner from several years back, and how he really didn't do much in the league. I think this guy is different. I think he's built differently. So I just bring that up while we're talking. But I do think, obviously, I really do think both Texas guys probably won't be there. But earlier on in this, I thought there was a chance one of them would slip. But I think just with their performances at the Combine, and I think Mitchell has really risen up boards. And I think the NFL views him differently than the average fan does. And I think we fall into that trap a lot. And I think both of these guys will probably go early. In the way Buffalo made that trade yesterday with Stephon Diggs, I think it's hard to believe both of these. I don't even know if these guys will be around for the Chiefs. I think that's how far they could go up in that first round. So that's where I'm at with Worthy. What about 3 for you?
Yeah, you had Ladd at 3. 3 for me is one of those big body receivers, and it's probably not the one you're thinking about. It's Keon Coleman for me. He has definitely slipped down draft boards. I think coming into this offseason, with everybody knowing Keon Coleman was likely to come out, I think he was on a lot of people's top 5 as a wide receiver coming out of college into this draft. He slipped due to his 40 time, 4.61 140. But when you watch the tape, this guy is anything but slow. He burns corners. He's obviously got the size, like Jordan said, that prototypical X receiver. He's 6'3", 213. Specializes in yards after the catch, jump ball, superb at manipulating defensive backs' blind spots. So you watch on the tape, he's always making that turn when the corners turning their head, keeping them, like you said with Ladd, making them look stupid. His ball skills, again, in the air, his body control, elite. I really, a lot of the talk is that he's going to slip. I really don't see him slipping because I think that NFL scouts are smart enough to not go with the 4.6 140. They put on the tape. They see his play speed. His 40 was slow, but there was another event that he ran. I think what was it, the 20-yard dash or something where he was the fastest in the combine. So it's, okay, maybe he had a bad day with the 40 at the NFL combine, but that is not his speed. He plays much faster than that. Again, some of his areas of weakness, you could talk about the 40 time. He's an inconsistent run blocking wide receiver. Like with Ladd, that's one of his strengths. With Keon Coleman, that's going to be one of his weaknesses. And then some people say that he struggles with like his long speed, getting deep, being that burner. But if you're getting a wide receiver that you want as a prototypical X jump ball, tall wide receiver, big wide receiver, not many of those guys are burners down the field that are going to be your deep threat. You got them for a reason, and that's for when you're on the 20-yard line and you want to throw a jump ball to the end zone, that guy's going to go and get it. And Keon Coleman, I think, is that guy. I think Keon Coleman is exceptional. I think he's going to be a really good receiver in this league. I think Panthers fans might have Kelvin Benjamin post-traumatic stress disorder because he's a Florida State wide receiver. He's a big Florida State wide receiver, but Keon Coleman is not Kelvin Benjamin at all. His route running's better, his catching's better, his everything is better than what Kelvin Benjamin was coming out of Florida State. So Keon Coleman at 3 for me. Yeah,
you said a lot. I put down he needs to work on his run blocking too. I thought he was average at best at times. He is a bigger guy. He was another guy at a comp 4. You might not agree with the comp. I had him at 4, by the way. So he was 4 for me. I got Mike Williams type guy from the Chargers. Kind of similar build. Mike Williams a little bit bigger guy. I don't know what he ran in the 40. Again, he did have Keon Coleman. I think he has slipped a little bit with his 40 time. But the guy played at Michigan State. I don't know if folks know that, but he played at Michigan State first. He committed actually for both football and basketball. We know most guys who are good at both of those sports usually pan out to be pretty damn good athletes. So he did commit to basketball. I think this guy's just an all-around athlete. You got to look at the drops. I mean, the guy had no drops last year. He's got pretty damn good hands. 10 missed forced tackles. He had 3 drops in 2021, so there was some slight improvement, still low on the drops from the stats I was pulling. But I'm looking at some of these games. I watched some of his stuff at Michigan State even, and he played Michigan last year in 2022. And these are literally some of my notes. He makes contested catch after contested catch in tight coverage. You throw the ball up, you talked about it, you mentioned it. You get a jump ball, this guy's coming down with it. He just is. You give him a fade, he's coming down with it. And then 2 plays later, I write jump ball, tight coverage, catches it both hands for the touchdown. So he is a jump ball machine. I think that's his forte. I don't think he had a massive tree route from what I saw. At Florida State. So that I think can maybe slight him a little bit. And I don't think he was great at getting separation because he had a lot of tight window throws. It was a lot of, sticky coverage, tight on him, but he would come down with it. And I have a little bit of concern with him being over reliant on his physical skills too much. So I think that is something I think he would need to work on if he at the next level. I also thought, and I watched this game, and this is not because I like Duke, but I didn't think he played very well versus Duke at all. I think Duke's secondary kind of hunkered him down, both him and Wilson in that game when they played. He had a really nice catch late in the 4th quarter. I will say that. He caught it I think it was between his legs, really good concentration. He split 2 defenders down the field. It was a hell of a play, but for the most part, he was pretty quiet in that game. So that just some of the notes I took from watching those games. But I do think this guy, and it clearly sounds like Carolina's looking, from what Jordan Reid just told us, is looking for that X receiver, and he fits the mold for this 100%. So start watching the tape on him because this could be your pick at 33. Why don't we go? So that was 4 for me. So are you at 4 now? Who is your 4th?
Yeah, my fourth is the popular guy from just down south, Xavier Legette. I think a lot of people in Carolina Kingdom know a lot about Xavier Legette. He's been a really popular name floated around. Like Jordan mentioned, they had a lot of people at his pro day. Carolina was running most of the wide receiver drills, like Jordan mentioned. Um, this is a guy through his first 4 years, 42 catches, 423 yards. The definition of a fifth year breakout, 33 catches, 1,255 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's a wide receiver that obviously has the size that they're, 6'1", 221, 4.39 40, which is absolutely ridiculous for his size. Uh, for me, I think he has an extremely high ceiling, probably one of the highest ceilings of the wide receivers we're talking about. But I don't know if he's the guy that you throw out there that Carolina's going to have to do. Throw out there opposite of Deontay Johnson and expect him to be a playmaker on day one in the NFL. He's 22 years old. He's got kick return capabilities as well. Time and time again on film, you see him catching the ball. I watched Josh Norris's video on Xavier Legette with Underdog Sports, and they mentioned that they manufacture a lot of touches for Xavier Legette, kind of like with Deebo Samuel when he was with South Carolina, and they did that for a reason because of his ability after the catch, his yards after catch. He makes people miss. He's really good at contested catches as well. Good body control. Obviously, his speed with the 4.39 40 is really, really good. But that fifth year breakout just really concerns me with his readiness for day one in the NFL. Again, this is kind of like Jonathan Mingo PTSD here, which I know a lot of people have compared him to because they were kind of both athletic freaks coming out of college into the NFL draft. But I think Legette is a little bit better of a prospect than Mingo was coming out. But again, I think Carolina, if they're sitting there at 33 and it's between Xavier Legette and one of those top centers or maybe a top edge falls, I might be looking at those positions instead of wide receiver.
Yeah, I had Legette, so we're kind of going back and forth here. You're at 4 right now. He is my 5. And I'm going to be saying a lot of things you've said already, but big body type receiver. He's got speed to him. I think he's explosive with the ball in his hands. He's got a massive wingspan, like ridiculous, crazy ridiculous. He can make some damn good grabs. There was a couple of times where I saw him get bottled up in coverage or in his routes with the corner, and he couldn't get off of it a couple of times. So if that was a concern, that would be one of them. But like you said, I think he's got really high potential. But like as Cam Newton always famously said, potential don't win you games. So the guy's got the traits, and he's a physical blocker in the run game. And I think Carolina obviously values that. And, this guy could fit the mold of that Mike Evans type receiver in Canales' offense, if that's what you're looking for, because this is the mold this guy fits. Now, don't go out there and say I think this guy is Mike Evans. I think that is going to fit your mold of that type receiver that was in Tampa Bay's offense last year. But this guy's had a story, and people I think need to know this. He lost his parents both at a young age. So he's been through some things, and he was kind of getting bounced around. You look at his previous couple seasons with South Carolina, the stats aren't there. You talk about the breakout year this year. So I think you got to kind of put some context to that. But, this guy has it all. And, if he puts it all together at the next level, he could be pretty special. And I get it. And people want to compare him with Mingo too. And I know that's, the popular move to make. But I think this guy could be a pretty damn good player if all things fall into place for him. Who is your 5? Because I've made it to 5 for me. You just keep stealing my guys here. Who's your 5th?
Yeah, we two great minds think alike. But real quick, another note about Leggett that's interesting is he was a high school quarterback, and he played quarterback until he went to college. So that could be an interesting wrinkle for whatever team drafts him. You know, those trick plays where the wide receiver throws the ball. Leggett could have a leg up on other players on the field with that, experience at the quarterback position in high school.
And I think one more note on him, sorry, because you talked about his speed, but his speed is very underrated. He ran a 4.39, and it shows on the field, because I had this in my notes in the Mississippi State game I was watching. Rattler hit him on a shallow cross, and he beat two guys with his speed, just straight line speed off of a shallow cross route for 76 yards at the house. Like, this guy, he's got wheels too. So I think he's got potential written all over him, but go ahead.
Yeah. I'm wondering if our number 5 is the same player. I'm going to guess that it is. I hope it's not, but
I don't think it is. And that was my 5th, by the way. We're kind of.
Oh, okay.
I had Worthy in there. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So my 5th is Troy Franklin. Oh my God, if I could say his name, Troy Franklin, wide receiver out of Oregon. He is a 6'2", 176-pound wide receiver, very slight frame, obviously, when you're 6'2", 176. That's going to be a knock on you, but we've seen Devontae Smith, we've seen other wide receivers come into the league smaller, and it's not been really a worry at all for Devontae Smith with his time in the NFL up to this point. Ran a 4.41, which was probably a little slower than people expected. That's probably why his draft stock is kind of slipping a little bit at this point, leading up to the draft. But this is a guy last year that put up 81 catches, almost 1,400 yards, and 14 touchdowns. He is a playmaker, absolutely a playmaker. On tape, he shows his speed. Again, I think this is a wide receiver that ran a slower 40 than what people expected, but on tape, he does not play that slow. He's more like a 4.3 guy than a 4.4 guy, and a versatile playmaker, obviously. He's played all over the field, X, slot, can do it all, really. I think, again, he's slipping because of that 40 time and other teams falling in love with other wide receivers. But Troy Franklin is a really interesting prospect, high upside. His biggest knock is his frame and that 40 time. And then his blocking ability wasn't the best either in the run game. But again, this is a prospect that really, if all things fall into place, Mr. Franklin might be one of the best wide receivers to come out of this draft.
Yeah, I looked at him early on when I was going through this. He was probably one of the second or third wide receivers I looked at, because I'm looking back at my notes, and this is a while ago that I put this together. I have another comp from. You might not agree with it. It's fine. It doesn't matter. We all have some people do the comp, some don't. I put Devonta Smith for him. I think he could be played to the level of him. I agree with you. I think he plays faster than his 4.41 at the NFL Combine. Biggest concern for me, obviously, is the drops. He had 9 this past year. He had 7, or he had 2 the year before, so he went from 2 to 9. But the guy is a machine with the ball in his hands. Like, he is special, and he'll make you miss. He had 526 yards after the catch, which was 15th out of all wide receivers in FBS. So really damn good player with the ball. And just looking at some of my notes that I had, I think he's lengthy. I know he's 6'2", but he seemed lengthy to me. I feel like he had a more expanded route tree. He had a lot of good double moves and speed, can take the top off the defense. I think he's great after the catch. Obviously, you see the yards there. I thought his blocking could have been better in the run game. But I seriously thought this guy could be like a true number 1. Like, seriously, that's going out my notes. I do think this guy could be special in the long run. And it'll be, interesting to see. I think he's got a really nice burst to him, and just those drops. 9 is a high number. That's a lot. That's one of the highest, I think, out of anyone we're going to be looking at tonight. So just something to keep in mind. But I do think, again, I think this class is loaded. I'm sure all these guys aren't going to be stars, but draft experts have said it. The wide receiver position is stacked. It is a good year to have a need at this position. So that he was my 6. So we're pretty damn close with everything. I thought you were going to throw me a surprise in here. You got no surprises. So let's talk about some of these other guys, because you had a couple of guys you wanted to mention. Why don't you talk us through the 2 that you sent me? You had Pearsall in there, and you had some other. Why don't you start with Pearsall? What do you like about him, or what do you think of him?
Well, I'm going to start with the other one first because I've got his stuff ready to go. So
All right.
the first one is Mr. Javon Baker from UCF, wide receiver. This is a guy who I think what a lot of teams are going to do this offseason is look at Puka Nacua and say, okay, they got this wide receiver. I don't know. I don't even remember where Puka went, 3rd or 4th round. And he comes out and has one of the best rookie seasons of all time as a wide receiver. So when Puka comes out, and this information is from Austin Abbott on Twitter. Go give him a follow. Puka comes out. He's running a 3-yard per route run and 50% contested catch rate. Those are 2 of his highly identified characteristics coming out of college. There's 3 wide receivers in the 2024 class that have reached those marks, and Javon Baker is one of them. There's only one that's 6 foot and 200 plus, and that is Javon Baker. He is 6'1" and 200 plus pounds. He was first in yards per reception with 21.9 yards per reception, 3rd in YAC per reception with 7.2, and 3rd in receiving yards per team pass attempt at 3.11. He averaged 3.18 yards versus man and 3.14 versus zone. In 2023, he had 1,139 yards and 7 touchdowns. Great college production, obviously, with the yards per catch, the 17.5 in his career in college. Obviously has the ability to make big splash plays. This is a wide receiver who's going to be available later in the draft, obviously, but just a sleeper, I think. I think Baker could be this year's Puka Nacua, and a guy that Carolina might target later on if they do have to end up passing on some of these earlier guys in the draft because of who's taken in the 1st round or what other players were available at the time. So that's one. And then the other one is
Let's wait on that. Let me bounce over here to give you a break. Let me talk about one, and then we'll go back to Pearsall. I didn't watch. Perfect. I'll be honest with you. I did not watch anything on Baker. I haven't. I've let that to you. So I don't know much about him. I saw a little bit of Pearsall. So when you talk about him, I can jump in a little bit too. But one guy I'm shocked that was not on your list, and I want to talk to you about him because you watched their games being a UNC fan. And this was the guy I first watched when I looked at all the receivers. I looked at, I think, 12 guys. He was the first one I took a look at. I think he's got some game to him. I really do. But he struggles with drops. We saw that at the Senior Bowl. And he had 3 this year. He had 7 the year before. So there was some improvement. He obviously didn't I put the star there again. He didn't play, obviously, the whole season. We know the whole debacle with the NCAA and all their bullshit that they do. But I feel like I said, I think he's got game to him. I think he's got great acceleration and speed. He topped out at like 21 miles an hour at the Senior Bowl, one of the highest accelerations for the wide receivers that were there. I would like to see him get more separation other than with just speed. From what I picked up on of just watching a couple of his games, I thought his yards after catch ability, I do have him up here. I thought that could have improved too. But I can't count. I don't think I could count on one hand or even two. And I talked to you about this before on one of the episodes. How many times he was open deep and Drake May either underthrew him or overthrew him. Like the guy was open and he just the ball wasn't there. So I do think this guy has some game to him. I wouldn't take him in the top of the second round. It would probably be a later round, probably. I don't even know if day 3, he'd probably be gone by the third round, but I would think more of the third, fourth type rounds. I don't know if I would not take him 33 or 39 personally, but I just want to get your take on him because you got to see him in his games. And I know, he obviously added a spark to that offense last year.
Yeah, he did. I watched a lot of Tar Heel football last year, which is something I don't typically say. I think Tar Heel football has been down bad for a long time, but Drake May brought a lot of excitement. And so when Dantes got into the game, finally the NCAA allowed him to play. He did bring a spark to the offense. But echoing what you've said, he drops the ball way too often. He struggles to separate. His yard after catches just isn't there. His ability to do that. I'm just not very high on him, and that hurts me to say that as a Tar Heel fan because I like him as a player. I like him as a person, but this is a guy that I think is going to have to be drafted somewhere, sit behind a couple of receivers for a couple of years, really learn the NFL game, and then transition more into a starting role at that point because I think he's going to need time. And I'm just not very high on Tez Walker at this point. With it being such a deep draft class, if it was last year's, then maybe it's a different conversation. But with this class being the way that it is, I mean, I haven't even ranked him. I would say he's probably in the 10 to 15 range for me as a prospect. And I wish it was higher, but I watched a lot of Tar Heel football. And yeah, Drake May have missed some throws deep, whether it be short or overthrown. But it also felt like when the ball was there, Tez Walker couldn't track it, and he couldn't catch it. So it was just frustrating for me to watch that. I know I'm probably a lot lower than a lot of Tar Heel fans are on Tez Walker, but I'm just not. And I think that it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way last season with some of the drops and crucial situations and him struggling to get open, and then when he does get open, he's dropping it. It was just frustrating. So I think he's going to need work in the NFL. I think he's going to need a couple of years, and then he can be a good player in the NFL for sure. But I just think with Carolina's situation and this class being so deep, they should be looking elsewhere. Unless, he falls to like something crazy like the 5th or 6th round, and which I don't think Carolina has a 6th round pick, but he falls that low and he's there, then yeah, you take a flyer on him obviously at that point. But with as many holes as Carolina has, I'm good right now on Tez Walker.
All right, let's talk about your guy Purcell for a moment.
Yeah, he really caught my eye at the combine. I really didn't know a whole lot about him prior, but this is a guy 4'4", 140. His 3-cone 6'6", which ranked in the 94th percentile in people that have measured in the 3-cone in the NFL Combine, which is a drill that really tests your agility, ability to change the direction, and that's his specialty. He was a 5th-year senior, so he's a little bit older. 963 yards, 65 catches, 4 touchdowns with Florida. Not great quarterback play again. I would say he's very similar to Ladd McConkey, very similar to Deontay Johnson. His natural ability to separate is really, really, really excellent. More of a slot receiver. So, again, that's an area that Carolina probably has a little bit of wealth, and they're looking elsewhere. But he's a very interesting prospect because, again, of his ability to separate and run routes in that short and intermediate area. I think he's going to be a dynamic weapon in the NFL. He's elusive after the catch, creative playmaking skills. I mean, I just think that he's going to be a good player in this league for a long time. Some people say on tape that he didn't play to his speed ability that he shows on a stopwatch, which I can see. He's not the everyday deep threat that you'd probably want. But again, his specialty is the slot, middle of the field, and he's got great hands. So I think that if he's there later in the rounds, which I think he's going to be, maybe a 4th or 5th round pick, then Carolina could definitely use depth. Adam Thielen's getting up in age. You can never have too many wide receivers that are good at one thing. And Ricky Purcell is good at playing across the middle and being that slot receiver.
Yeah, and back to your point too a little bit here is Adam Thielen ain't getting any younger. Like
Yeah.
Carolina is still going to need someone in the slot at some point. So I don't think shying away from some of these guys. I think they need all the talent they can really get. And kind of shifting gears a little bit because I watched maybe one or two games of this guy, so I don't want to put too much on it. I just didn't see anything special. Like there wasn't anything I was like, oh, this is what he's. I guess he had obviously the low drops, but nothing jumped out to me watching those couple games I did. But one guy I do want to kind of shift to, and this is another slot type receiver here. And if I can find it, try to find it here quickly. And that's here he is. Guy out of Michigan, Roman Wilson. I have the comp in. I guess I'm comping I don't usually comp guys. I never do this, but it's just a feel thing. And for me, it was, and maybe this is just too generous, but I was getting like Tyler Lockett vibes from this guy, and kind of in that kind of thinking Canales system type thing where he could fit in. Small wide receiver. Think he plays way bigger than his size. Go watch the Senior Bowl. Go watch the one-handed catch he made against that corner.
Yeah.
Juke the shit out of him one-handed on the. I mean, that play was incredible play. 4.93 40-yard dash. Doesn't have a lot of drops. Sure with his hands. I mean, look at the passer rating when targeted. He's not dropping the ball when they throw his way. Getting open. But I'll tell you what. I watched, I think 5 or 6 games of his this past season. And I have on your countless times, McCarthy was either sacked when he was open, was looking the other way when he was open, overthrew him when he was open. Literally, I wrote that down about, I would say 10 times, and I got about 50 bullet points on here. So, I mean, that's 1 out of 5. Like, there were many times he was open and he was not throwing the ball. So this guy kind of similar to McConkey. He's a separator. He can get separation, and I feel like he's a smooth route runner, very shifty. He's quick off the line with his breaks, and he's got some damn good hands too. I'd like to see a more impressed man and see how he does against that, because you're always concerned with smaller guys. How can you get off of that tight coverage? But he has got some really nice cuts. So just one to look at. I know every one of these guys are not home runs. I get it. But this class is so goddamn deep. And I do think this guy's I think he can be a pretty damn good player in this league with the right team. So just one to watch. Another one that I was taking a look at it. You got another one at all? Have you? Because I got a couple.
No.
I have 2 guys. Well, let's talk about these 2 quickly, since I watched them. I might as well go through them while we're talking about them. Trying to find them here. I'll take this off so I'm not running through them. Let's go to Malachi Corley, because this guy's got he's got one of the 30 visits for Carolina. So they're bringing him in. There's some interest there. He's the quote unquote, everyone puts it on him, the Yak King. I mean, that's what he's known for. He was 648 yards after the catch. He was 5th out of all receivers in FBS last year in Yak. 5'10", 215. But this guy, I feel like I'm talking good about all these guys, but this guy, I mean, he's got potential. I think he's more of a later round, probably 3rd, or I would think around the 3rd round is where he's going to probably go. Maybe earlier. Maybe he's one of these guys that, the NFL views him a little bit higher than we do. But I wrote down, I feel like he runs like a running back with the ball in his hands. He seeks out contact. That was another note I put in there. He's not afraid of getting hit. He obviously didn't face a ton of competition playing at Western Kentucky. I would like to see more of his route tree and more contested catches, because I didn't see a lot of that. But I wrote this down. Last thing was, every time he had the ball in his hands, I thought he could break one. Like, he had that dynamic to him. But again, lesser competition, you got to factor all that in. He improved on, or actually he had 3 drops in 2022, went to 6 last year, so that increased slightly. But the guy had 15 missed tackles forced last year, 15, which is pretty damn impressive too. So another guy to watch. He played running back, wide receiver, and DB in high school. The guy fucking played 3 positions. So he had that versatility. Just clearly just an all-around athlete, I think, in terms of that. So just one to watch. There's one other guy I wanted to touch on, Bryson, because there's been some of the folks on Twitter who like this guy, and he's one we've had on the show, and it's Ricky. Ricky loves this guy. This is Ricky's guy. I know his show is escaping me. They just changed the name of it. Do you remember the name of his show? The Bo Body Show, I think it's called. Yep. The Bo Body Show. That's their new show. So go check them out. We've had him on a couple times. He'll be here for our mock draft too as well. I feel like this is Ricky's darling. I don't want to speak for him, but it seems like it on Twitter. I'll tell you what, Bryce, I don't know if you've watched this guy at all. I wasn't going to do much on him, and then I saw him talking about him. I saw Edgar, and I'm like, I need to go see what this guy's about. I'm not a big fan. I'll be totally honest with you. I didn't see it. What are my notes here? I didn't think his route running was ideal, personally. I thought he needed work in the run block game. And I also thought he could get pushed around in press coverage. And there was a couple plays, and I wish I could pull them up. I really do. I counted, I think it was 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 times and I remember fans complaining about this last year with Jonathan Mingo. And I believe even the QB school pointed this out, where when Mingo would come off the line, he almost sometimes on these little quick routes that he had, either out routes or in or shallow crosses, it was just like slow delayed into his cut. Polk did this several times, and I thought of it over, and I remember people bitching last year about Mingo doing that. It was just like this slow stride into his cut. And Polk did this a ton. And I get it. You want to change up tempo, but I picked up on that, and I'm like, man, and we all bitched last year about Mingo doing this. And I saw this numerous times where he was doing this on some of his routes. So that was a red flag for me. I will say this. I do think he does a nice job finding soft spots and zones. He did that several times in the couple of games that I watched of his. So I do think there's a positive there. I also think he isn't afraid to get hit. There were a couple times where he was fighting for extra yards. I mean, he caught a ton of screens, and there was one behind the line of scrimmage. He took a guy head on. There was like 2 or 3 guys on him, and he got a first down of it. So this guy, he's going to fight for you. You're going to get that out of him. But the one game I watched in particular, Texas. If you go back to that game, he had. Let me see here. Just trying to make sure I have this right. So he had one really good play against Texas. And got to make sure this is the right game. I'm sorry. Hold on here. Just make sure there was a game where I pointed out where I'm like, man, he didn't do much in this game at all.
Well, while you're looking at that,
yeah, go ahead.
It's a guy that, we've talked about it a couple of times. He ran a slow 40, a 4.52, but the film doesn't show someone that's faster than a 4.52. He lacks the acceleration in the open field, that top level burst to be that deep threat. And, he was playing opposite of Rome Odunze. How much production came from teams keying in on him and leaving Polk open, or whatever it was. I'm with you. I'm not a huge fan of his, but I do trust Ricky, and I do trust his talent evaluation. So if Ricky sees something, then maybe I just need to sit down with Ricky so he can point it out to me. But yeah, I mean, I'm just not seeing it with him at this point. I haven't watched a ton of film, being honest. I haven't watched a ton of film, folks, but from what I have seen, I don't see that speed on the NFL level that's going to consistently beat, the talent that he's going to be facing on the opposite side of the ball in the NFL.
Now, going back to the Texas game, it wasn't the Texas game. He had a really damn good play. He had a deep post corner route, really nice route, and then he had a spin move on the defender. I think he took it like 70 yards for the touchdown. And then he had it was kind of a fluke. It was a post down the middle. The defender went to pick it. It got tipped up in the air and no one was around. He caught it in the end zone off the tip. It was just dumb luck type of thing. And then he had a couple wide receiver screens. So he did have a good game, that one. And I'm trying to look through my notes here to find. But overall, I don't see it. Ricky, we're going to talk to Ricky in a couple of weeks here. So we'll have him on and we'll ask him all about Polk. It just didn't flash out for me with this guy. So that's one he's just not on my radar really for Carolina, but Ricky loves them. So it's Ricky approved. Jalen Polk from Washington. Any other guys, Bryson, that you have that you want to talk about in the wide receiver room at all? Do you have anyone else?
Well, I'll talk about some players that I'm interested in that I plan on learning more about. Because of just their, I would say, draft stock is rising, kind of being talked about more at this point leading up to the draft. One is Jermaine Burton, the wide receiver from Alabama. Got that connection with Bryce Young. Really interesting in watching some of his tape and learning more about him. I feel like he's rising up draft boards. He's a 6-foot receiver, ran a slower 40, but kind of a jump ball guy, over the shoulder, fade kind of guy from what I'm taking away from some of the notes I'm seeing. But I'm going to watch him and then Brendan Rice because if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Rice on a top 30 visit for Carolina?
Yes. And son of Mr. Jerry Rice.
Yeah, the son of Jerry Rice. So I'm interested to watch those two guys. It is ridiculous how deep this draft is, dude. I mean, you get down to like 10 through 20 ranked prospects, and you're like, man, I could see that guy being a number one wide receiver on the team.
Yeah, wide receiver. Let's make the note. Yes, wide receiver is deep this year. Crazy deep. So, but I think we're going to leave it there. I don't have anything else to add on the wide receiver. And those two guys you mentioned, I saw JJ talking about that Burton today. That's another one I want to look at because I feel like they're going to pick guys that Bryce is comfortable with and like too. So that could be one to watch later. I feel like he'd be a little bit deeper in the draft, but one to watch. But again, we'll talk more as we get closer. I think next week we'll probably highlight some of the other positions in need. Maybe talk about center, edge, corner. We're still trying to sort that out, but we'll talk. We'll hit on some of those needs. We're only a couple of weeks away, and then we'll come up and do that mock draft coming up here the week of the draft. So that'll be exciting. And again, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We're getting closer. I think we're at like 420 right now for subscribers. Once we hit 500, we will be picking someone for a custom Panthers jersey. So hit that subscribe button. We would really appreciate it. And we just want to thank everyone for tuning in to the Panthers on Tap podcast. You can catch our episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap for all your analysis and breaking news. And as always,